What's up, everybody? Thank you so much again for tuning in to the I Choose Series podcast. On this next episode, we interview Chris Felice. Chris Felice is a criminal investigator for a sheriff's office in New York State. He started working specifically in family services back in 2016. Now, this episode was originally recorded from our Facebook Live on January 10th, 2019. I'm very grateful to share this episode with you today, and I hope you enjoy.
I can tell you a little bit about my career and what I do. I'm a criminal investigator for a sheriff's office here in New York State. I've been working as a police officer since 2004. I did 8 years in patrol, doing patrol work, before I transitioned into investigations. And since 2016, I've been assigned to a unit that works family services. So that's kind of where I'm at in my career. I work on any cases that involve kids, whether it's juveniles that are getting into trouble or headed down a path that isn't good, but I also work with any child victims. I work with any victims of domestic violence type crimes. So, yeah, so that's my career. But I've been on this run of what I call taking off the jacket, and what taking off the jacket to me is how far too often we allow what we do for a career or a job to be all that we are. And so in taking off the jacket, who are we beneath that?
So what do you mean by that? So what do you mean? Like, let's go a little bit deeper. So I love where you're going here.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny. I had this realization. I ran into some people that I went to high school with. Actually went all through school with them. I live in a smaller community, but I hadn't seen these people in 20 years. And within about 5 minutes of having a conversation with each of them, I could have told you their whole life story only about their jobs. And this is what I do for work. I have 2 children, and I've been married for 12 years. Yeah. And that was really kind of it. And to break through that to that personal connection, rather than just contact, was really tough. And so I got thinking about that, and that far too often when we meet people, the question comes up of what do you do, and that tends to be what steers the direction of your whole communication with them, rather than truly connecting with somebody.
I got to tell you, it's interesting that you say that, because I'm a married man now. I have children of my own. I'm a family man. But back in the day, I remember I was in the city, lived in Brooklyn, and I went on an adventure with some of my boys, and sit down next to this young lady, and trying to strike up a conversation. The first words out of my mouth are, "So, what do you do for a living?" And she looks over at me and she's like, that's such a boring way to start. Forget about what you do. Forget about what I do. Let's talk about some things that we're really interested in. And, she kind of struck me in a really good way very, very quickly. But I never forgot about that, And I just think that you're like, I love what you're saying, because I feel that, we kind of only touch on the surface of, human beings, what we are, what it is that we do. And we kind of box ourselves in based on that, But if we go deeper, if we take an opportunity or we take a minute to really sit down and go deeper, I think that the biggest risk is that that requires us to listen to each other. So it's really easy to ask the kind of questions of what do you do, because then the response, well, I know because I'm working this job and this is what I do, and we have a conversation and it feels right, but we don't really get anywhere. And I don't know. I mean, do you think that people are sometimes afraid to get to know people? What do you think? What do you think it is?
I think that, you know, I think that we become so consumed by, the work that we do, that's
Yeah,
an easy way out, and it gets in the way of that true human connection. And I think that when we can connect with people, we know that we're gonna it's somebody, if you meet somebody that usually you can tell pretty quickly if it's somebody that you're interested in really having a conversation with, um, and that connection is pretty quick. You kind of, um, you can see where that relationship's going based on even your
yeah,
first contact. But a lot of times, um, I don't think people are, well, yeah, people I think do get afraid to really go deeper. People are scared to
mm,
be vulnerable with other people. Um, but at the same time, I think it's an easy way out. Um, and everybody wants
yeah,
to impress, right? So, I mean, I can say, you know, I've been working, uh, as a police officer for the last 15 years, and before that I did this, and you know, it all sounds great, um, but is that all that I am?
yeah. I mean, it's interesting because when we invite people to come on the guest, that's my first question. Tell me a little bit about yourself. And the first words out of everyone's mouth is basically what they do. um,
Right,
which is interesting because
right. So I didn't
say that
tell you
again.
the other piece of. I said I didn't tell you the other piece of who I am. I told you though. Well, I can start and tell you
Yeah,
what I do for a career. Um, because there is so much other. Uh, you know, I'm so much more than just a police officer that investigates
yeah.
crimes against children.
That's got to
You
be
know.
tough though too. I
Um,
mean, I know things changed for me once I had kids, and I don't know, man. I don't really do well with crimes against kids.
well, most people don't, and I'm really passionate about the work that I do, uh, because it's where it's where I feel I can make the
Mm,
biggest impact. Um, because kids are vulnerable, um, but they're also uh, true victims. Not that adults can't be a true victim, but um, with children, a lot of times, especially when a child is a victim of a crime, um, they usually it's not they're not perpetrated against by a
mm,
stranger, so they don't have the support systems, and they don't have a lot of times the means to move towards
yeah,
healing. Uh, they don't have the ability to protect themselves, and so it's where I've always felt that I can make the greatest impact, uh, and really kind of you know do everything we can to get services in place, uh, for that
yeah.
child moving
And
forward.
I mean, I like, in this show, it's all about being real, being transparent, being vulnerable, saying how we really feel, saying what we really think, because I think that people hide behind masks and stuff. And so, like, I do want to challenge you on that because I feel that, like, man, the system has got a bad rap. It's got a bad rap. Like, before I worked in film, way back in the day, I worked as a case manager in New York City. And so I've been to every projects in Brooklyn, some of the Bronx and Queens, and that part of my job was meeting the families and working with young kids who were felons, ages 16 to 21, who have fallen down the wrong path. And I have to tell you that it was an eye-opening experience for me working in that field, because I feel that I went in with the best intentions, and then not to put anyone down or anything like that, but I feel that I saw things happen that kind of put me off a little bit. I heard stories from the other side, that about how kids, these kids 16, 17, 18 years old, were treated by the system, for small things, and not having the support at home, then not having the support from the system. It's hard for me, to and again, I love kids, and I know that some of them are definitely not angels, especially some of these 16, 17-year-olds. I get it. But I feel that some of these kids have been betrayed not only by their families and their friends, but by the system.
Yeah, so I'm not going to be a person that will disagree with you on that, because I think that things haven't always been the best they could be. And I can tell you that I'm very fortunate to be doing what I do within this unit, because it's supported by the administration where I work.
Yeah.
They believe in it. The unit hasn't always been around in the form that it currently is. I work very closely. I have a partner. So there's two of us that work, and we're in a smaller county, but my partner Mel, we're very fortunate to be able to focus so much of our time on these cases, because before we had this unit, I worked in investigations before this unit was formed, and I did work, these same types of cases, but in a mixture of all the other work that I did as well. So it was really hard to shift gears. I think to get to a point where you're really, we can be good at a lot of different things, but it's hard to be great at a lot of different things, And so it has allowed us, though, to build relationships with all these other agencies as well. We do a lot of outreach work. We do a lot of work with different organizations that provide services to juveniles and to kids. And, as time moves forward, I think that, we're moving in the right direction, even for those 16, 17 years old, 18-year-olds, because I don't know if you're aware of the changes in the law that have occurred. Actually, October 1st, the new law went into effect for Raise the Age, which raises the age of criminal responsibility for, before October 1st, once you turn 16, you could be charged as an adult in New York. And so with that came all of the same treatment that an adult would get if they committed a crime. And so there's been this big push to increase those ages because, let's face it, and there's probably a lot of police officers out there that will disagree with me, but I don't care about that, because I do believe that the legislation in spirit is a good idea. So October 1st of 2018, the age raised from 16 to 17. So now if you're 16 years old, you can still be charged, but you'll be charged as an adolescent offender, which basically all the juvenile stuff attaches to that. So you'll never set foot in a jail. It's the program is more based on um, changing, creating a change for that person, um, and to try and get them back on track. Because we know that, once a kid enters into the system, usually once a kid goes to jail, chances
Yeah.
are they're going to be back there. Um, so that's been a good thing. October 1st of 2019, the age will go up again. So that'll encompass 16 and 17-year-olds. So, they'll basically be
Yeah.
considered
And
a
I have to tell
juvenile,
you, it's in my
which,
experience, as a caseworker, these 16, 17-year-olds, I mean, yes, by age I saw 16, 17-year-olds. I saw grown men physically. But a lot of the kids I was working with mentally were stuck at a much earlier age. And jail
right,
was not the answer. These were kids who were really mixed up because they did not have the support that they needed. The environment that they were brought up in encouraged the behavior that they fell into. And I'm not blaming other people. I believe that we're all responsible for our own choices. Hence, this whole thing is called I Choose. However, if you're third or fourth generation welfare, and have never been taught that education is important, and getting a job for $10 an hour or $15 an hour when you could be selling drugs on the corner making a couple of grand for the weekend. It's all upside down, it's all mixed up.
yeah, it is. And, I can tell you, um, you know, I think that jurisdictionally, depending on your area, um, your downstate, New York City, there's, the
Mm.
dynamics are a little bit different, but there's some things that don't change. Um, I mean, let's face it. At 16 years old, are you uh, are your cognitive abilities there to make good, healthy choices, or to make choices that and truly have a full understanding that this is going to impact my life when
No,
I'm
absolutely
25?
not. And we had this conversation last week
So,
when Melissa and I were talking, and there was this idea of putting yourself in a box, even if you come from a healthy background. As an 18-year-old, you don't want to be deciding what your 55-year-old person is going to be, because when you get to 55, you're going to look back at this young kid and say, I don't want this kid deciding my future. You know what I mean? And
right,
that's what growth
right,
is, right? I
yeah.
mean, so let me ask you a question, and I think this is important. I want to know, and I'm sure people who are watching this, why did you get into this? Why do you do what you do?
Uh, you know, there was a long time where I really wasn't sure why I chose this path, and uh, I can tell you that, when I was a teenager, if you would have said you're gonna be a police, and this actually goes right along with what I just said. 16, thinking about what you're gonna
Yeah.
do when you're 25, right? When I was a teenager, you could have said you are going to become a police officer, and before the end of your career, you're going to work in this area doing the. I would have laughed, because at that time in my life, I personally didn't give it a thought about becoming a police officer. But you know, looking back over time, I can see why I ended up where I'm at. Um, and I think it goes back. Well, I know it goes back to, when I was younger, when I was a kid, and different experiences, growing up. I think that there's all kinds of points that have steered me to exactly where I'm at now today and what I'm doing. Um, so, experiences of, you know, people close to me being
Yeah.
victimized by adults. Um, and 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 I think that kind of really was the starting point. But moving forward, there's all kinds of things, and then when I've taken on jobs and different opportunities with my career in law enforcement, when I've said yes, I haven't known why. Sometimes I've walked away
Why did I say
saying, "What did I get
that?
myself into?" Um, but it's all brought me to this point right now where I'm at, and the I guess really looking back, um, it's because kids are so vulnerable. Um, I won't go into details, but I mean, I have some people in my life that are very close to me that were brutally victimized as children. Um, I I have somebody very close to me that was kidnapped, and thankfully, she was located and rescued as a child. Um, but I also have had all kinds of other experiences too, from you know even with just different emergency stuff, because I did work in EMS and uh, you know, on an ambulance before I got into law enforcement and did some firefighting stuff. And so to pinpoint one reason or one thing, I think is impossible for me. Um, I've drugged the answer to this question out, I think, probably about 3 or 4 minutes now. But um, all in all, it's all of these little inflection points throughout life that have got me to where I'm at.
So let me ask another question then. If not, I know that there's a ton of reasons you said why you got into this field. How do you do what you
Hmm.
do? As a human being, um, I'm sure that some of the stuff that you witness, um, how do you do it?
You know, you do you do this. I can't tell you that this work is easy because it is some of this stuff is things that nobody should ever have to see or hear about or deal with. Um, and a lot of times, people will say, how could you interview this person, um, after they've done something so horrible, or uh, you know, somebody has to do that work, and uh, to act on emotion doesn't help anybody. So physically, how do I do it? I keep the end goal, in mind as we're going through the stages, um, and I know that it's for the greater good, and I know that, um, you know, a lot of times things are very tough for the victims in these cases, but I also know that there's going to be a lot of people out there in their adult lives, I hope, uh, that will see maybe me as that inflection point, that turning point in their life, that person that believed in them, the person that you know did what they could to help them, and and bring them to a
Yeah,
better
and I
place.
would have to agree with you. I think that people like you who understand that there's good and evil in the world here, and you've made a decision where you're choosing to be the good guy, even though in the system that you work within, there are still bad people. But you have made like a single choice, an active decision that like you want to be, you know, the beacon of hope or the beacon of light for an individual who needs you. And that encouragement, you know, I think comes from a deep place of love. I'm very, very curious to know like where this comes from and why you have these desires inside. You know, you mentioned a lot of things about, you know, different people that you know that were close to you that didn't have somebody that was taken advantage of. And I want to know, where is it in you, Chris, where you feel that you need to be the superhero? You know, and I mean that respectfully. I don't mean that in like a, you know, but I believe that like, you know,
Yeah.
as human beings, like, you know, what differentiates the superhero from the ordinary person is that taking that one extra step. You know, it's not flying. You know, it's just that one extra step that makes a difference in someone else's life.
You know, I have to. You're digging into
I
me,
gotta
man.
go there, man. I'm not a psychologist, but I mean, I you know, I love talking to people, and I've been working in documentaries and
Yeah.
films, and I've been to terrible places all over the world and talked to people about terrible things, um, all with the goal of inspiring and telling people's stories. And so I'm curious to know why it is that you know, why it is that you really want to do this, you know?
Well, I guess to answer that, I have to really dig a little bit, peel back those layers a little bit more than I can't give you a generic answer of
No,
you know,
that's a different Facebook Live show.
it's
This
the
is real.
yeah, right. Um, no, the you know, it's a place that I can make an impact. I've said that it's a place where I can really change the course of direction for some people, um, but it's also out of desire to do things, you know,
Yeah.
maybe better. Um, not that you know, we, not that you know this type of casework is being done wrong or intentionally. I mean, intentionally in a way that wouldn't be beneficial, uh, or the most victim focused, I guess. But to want to create a better way of doing this, um, so that it's not only more effective um, in the long run on the criminal in the enforcement end of things, but on a on a victim centered point as well. Uh, and you know, not just anybody should be working on these cases. I
Absolutely.
truly believe that. Uh, if it's something that you can't do, you should tap out before you get
Yeah.
started, because you can make the situation so much worse. And it's little, you know, it's little things. You know, and I can't say that I've always done um, things the best way. I learn new ways of doing things all the time. I'm always learning. Uh, the way that we work these cases has changed, even since I started in investigations in 2012. And I think that um, you know, you have to be focused on the victims in these cases, which is different than like property crimes. Okay, we'll say, you know, somebody who's just for an easy example, somebody whose car gets stolen out of the driveway is much different. I mean, they're still a victim. They've still been victimized. Somebody still has, uh, you know, crossed that personal line with them, but it's very different than the victim of we'll say a sexual abuse or a
Yeah.
sex assault
Yeah.
type case. And you have to do this for the victims.
Yeah, man. I mean, look, for everybody who's just tuning in here, we are speaking with Chris. It's Felice, right? Am I pronouncing that correctly? Chris Felice.
Yes.
And we are
Yep.
talking about, why he does what he does. Chris has made a choice here where he's one of the good guys, and he's going out on a limb every single day and working with young victims who've encountered a variety of different violations. Is that proper to say that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's anytime that you could think of where a child would come in contact with law enforcement, you could count me in. Like, I probably, if you're, within my jurisdictional area, at some point, I'm gonna be involved there.
So here's a question
somewhere.
for you, and I mean, this may come across sound a little facetious. I hope not. But being in your line of work and seeing how many young people are in a crisis state, is it easier for you to digest all the adults around us who are constantly screwing up? Because you know that a percentage of them, even though you didn't work on their case, statistics show that we have a lot of older people who are dealing with a ton of issues, who have not dealt with them, who have been a victim, and who are just kind of like, regurgitating and passing on, the drama that they've encountered. And on a wide scale, when we take a look at the population, I would say a certain percentage of them, turns to different outlets, specifically, drugs, alcohol, abuse of others, anger, all of those things, which is really just a cycle for waste. It's a cycle for waste until they're able to come out of that and kind of either accept what's happened and or deal with what's happened.
Yeah, one of the biggest parts of any, first of all, to answer your question, I don't wonder why we have, why we see so many adults with problems that we're seeing, because the approach has changed over time, right? So I can tell you 25 years ago, a child that was a victim of a crime committed against them, they weren't so concerned with making sure that child had services, counseling services, different treatment. What's the plan here? That how are we going to make sure that this kid is getting counseling? How are we going to, this person doesn't have a financial ability to get counseling. They don't have transportation. They don't have a support system at home to say, you don't feel like going, but you really need to go, and we're going together. 25 years ago, that would have been totally different. It would have been that, that child being brought to the police station to tell somebody a very personal account of something that happened to them, and then they would have to, complete a deposition or a statement, and then they would be sent out the door.
Yeah.
Whereas now, the way we do things. We have a multidisciplinary team, so we get people from all the different service organizations that would have a part in whether it's victim services, to support that person, through the court process, child protection services, to get somebody in the home to see what's going on and where systems can be improved in the home. Counseling services. We take all of those different organizations or all of those people and we get them together to figure out what the best plan for this person is.
Yeah, it's a different world today.
It is.
So
and that's like I said, a lot of things. We're making progress. We're getting better. And that approach that I was just saying with with the team mentality is much better for a victim. Instead of having to tell their story over and over and over again, now they have to tell it one time during an interview, and anybody that needs to be a part of that is observing that in real time. So it eliminates the child from having to be, face that trauma over again. And when they do, we have victim services there to support them through that process within the court.
So let me ask you a question, Chris. Because after we do these Facebook Lives, I usually put them right up, broadcast them, and sometimes I'll cut them up into little pieces and share that, because not everyone's watching the whole 40 minutes or hour that we do on these. So I try to take some of those best moments when I have the time and edit them and put them together. I guess one question would be is that for part of the reason that we're doing these Facebook Lives is because we know our reach. We know that we can reach people. Our whole entire campaign and what we stand for is reminding people that they're the lead in their life story, that that don't allow other people to be the lead. Be who you were created to be. For somebody who's in a situation, a younger person maybe, who's facing some difficulty, who is struggling, who is up against the wall, who's basically been taken advantage of, who doesn't have the support system, where do they go?
Well, specifically, it would depend on where you're at. But I would say that a good place to start would be, if you're a young person that's still in school that has a school resource officer available to you.
Is that like a guidance counselor?
Well, a school resource officer is something that, it's not brand new. It's been, but it's an officer that is within the school that can act as kind of a liaison. They're kind of bridging that gap between, the schools and the kids and the schools and law enforcement. So they're really a liaison person, but they're a police officer that's trained in, how to work with juveniles. They also would have all the contacts to get the ball rolling to get some services for you.
Let's say there's an older person who's been suffering from some kind of abuse. What's the best and most direct route for somebody to go from being in danger to being safe?
Well, that's actually, and I didn't talk about that, but that's another function of the Family Services Unit where I work is crimes against the elderly. But if you are an older person, I would say that there's some fantastic um, advocacy groups out there that can help you get services. In the local area where I am, which is in the Finger Lakes, there's a group called Safe Harbors of the Finger Lakes. They're a phenomenal group of victim advocates, and uh, you know, they do a lot of domestic violence advocacy work. Um, there's another organization out there called Lifespan, and they do elderly advocacy work. Um, you know, so there are services and options available, and I would just say, if at all possible, you need to ask
Yeah.
for help, because a lot of times, you know, people don't know
Yeah.
that you need help. Um, I can tell you that, my partner and I, we review case files, and we review domestic violence incidents, and we review all those reports. So we look for patterns, and we look for things to try and see where we're
Yeah.
missing things. But there's not, I can tell you that there's not a unit within each agency out there
Yeah.
that does what we
Yeah.
do.
I think what you're saying about, asking for help is key because, there may be people in situations where they just assume either people know or they may assume that it's just, that there is no way out. I think that's a really big thing for people who are struggling in all circumstances is this feeling that there's no way out. And I think the biggest part of this whole campaign, I've said this 100,000 times now, we wake up every morning and we can get out of bed and we can walk that same path we walked yesterday, or we can choose to walk a different path. Whether, we are a victim or whether we are hurting ourselves or whether we're hurting other people, wherever we are, like there is no absolute, there is no perfection to life. Life is about this growth. It's about reaching out. It's about asking for help and not only giving it, but receiving it as well. Sometimes we all want to help other people. It's really difficult though when people want to help us. We say, "Oof, I'm not worthy." The reality is that we're all
Right.
worthy of that help. We're all worthy of that assistance. And as human beings, if we can get down to a place where we can choose to take care of each other, and I say love, is a choice. When we will do an I choose love, that will be a professional cinematic short film because you know to me, in my opinion, love is a sacrifice, and that's a conscious decision whether we're going to choose to make that sacrifice every day or not. It's not just a feeling, and so that's why I believe so hardcore about this idea that that we need to remind people that no matter what the world tells you you did, no matter what the world tells you you are, you know, you have to look inside and find out who you are. And you have to be that and surround yourself with people who can encourage that and nurture that. And if you're around people who are not encouraging that, who are not nurturing that, then and you stay around with those people, then it's your fault.
Right. It's, I can remember being a teenager, and my parents saying, you are who you hang
Yeah.
with, right? And you say, well, no, just because they did this doesn't
Yeah.
mean I'm going to do it. Well, I mean, let's be honest. You're going to become and do the things that an average of the people that you spend the
Absolutely.
most time
Because we're
with.
influenced by what other
Um,
people think. So if we're hanging around with people who
right.
think that this is cool, that something bad is not is cool, we're going to think that way. We're going to do those things. We're going to be more subjected to do that. The reality is that we need to stop giving a shit about what other people think of us, and that's including our parents, you know, because they're the biggest
Yeah.
biggest
Yeah.
obstacles. You
No.
know, I'm a parent myself, and I was talking with Eddie one time, and I said, man, I said, you know, we are going to screw up our kids. Like, that's what happens. We screw up our
Yeah.
kids, and our parents
Yep.
screwed us up. You know, the thing is that we have to look past all of that, recognize we're all doing the best that we can if our intentions are right, you know, but
Right.
not give a shit about what other people think. You know, integrity is doing the right thing when nobody's watching, not to score points on or likes on Facebook and Instagram.
Right. And you know, it's tough to draw a line in the sand sometimes, right? It's tough to set those boundaries with people because there's a reason why they have
Oh,
influence
totally.
over us. So it's really tough to draw that line, right? Um, but you know, you got to do you, and I would say, you know, the sooner you can figure that out, the better off you'll be, because it'll become easier to be who you really are. It'll become easier for you to be truthful
Yeah.
with yourself. Um, and once you can be truthful with yourself, you know, it opens a lot of doors for
It takes
you.
the cuffs off.
Right. So it's taking off the jacket. You know, I mean, whatever you call it. You know, once you can be, you know, true with who you really are, life gets good. Uh, I'm just getting ready to launch a podcast that is basically centered around that same
Yeah, that's
idea.
awesome, man. I hope I get to be a
Because
guest on there.
I tell you what, I would love to have you as a
Because
guest.
we're on the same page, man.
Um,
This is what I love about
Yeah.
this. You know, I had no intentions of ever doing these Facebook Live episodes every week. I had no intentions of it. But after we released I Choose Hope, I saw an influx of emails where people wanted to share their stories, and I said, man, I can't get my whole crew and do everyone's story. But through this community, we can have open dialogues. We can have honest conversations with different people who come from different backgrounds and share and talk and learn from each
Right.
other.
Yeah, and my podcast, Shame or Shameless podcast, that's what I mean. It's everybody has a story. Everybody. Sometimes I think we need to. I think we need to be put on the spot to really dig deep and think, um, you know, about the truth
Absolutely.
within us, and to be called out. And you know, obviously, you would never do that to somebody to cause or inflict pain, or you know. But I think that it is healthy too to even take a moment and reflect on yourself to dig that stuff up. And so yeah, you really have to stretch sometimes, and part of that stretching, you may have to fire some people from your life for a little bit. You know, you might have to eliminate those negative influences. You might have to, if you're going against the grain, there's always going to be people trying to pull you back,
Totally.
right? And it's easy to be influenced when it's people that we care about, especially.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you have to live for more than yourself. You know, I think that that's a key factor too, because if you don't think highly of yourself and the only person you're living for is yourself, it's pretty much a lose-lose. You know, when you have a higher power, when you have children, when you have responsibilities, when you have other things, you can really start to decipher between what's important, what's really important, what kind of feels important but is not. You know, and I think that's important in all of our growth. You know, if you're seeking to grow, you have to have control, not over other people but over yourself. That's the greatest control you can have, is over yourself. You know, and as human beings, man,
I would.
we face it all. We have animalistic instincts. There's good, there's bad in all of us, you know, but having control of that and knowing your strengths, knowing your weaknesses, man, that separates, you know, the good from the great.
Yeah, and you know, if you're missing something, you can. I always say, you know, what we pour into our heads, right, will come out eventually. So, you know, if there's things that you want to improve on, self study is, you know, right there at the top. And um, you know, there's always ways to. It takes some true time with yourself to change things for yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in
Um,
part of that growth, in part of that change, I think that one of the most important things that I've learned very, very recently, you know, is not to compare yourself to other people, but to compare yourself to who you were yesterday. That's the only
right.
comparison you need to make.
It's yeah. Far too often you know, we all have this preconceived idea of what
Yeah,
we're supposed to be um, to the world, and we lose so much in trying to be that sometimes that you know it doesn't allow us to
yeah.
speak our truth.
Love it, man. I love it. So
Um,
for people out there who are loving this episode, please tag somebody who needs, you know, who needs to hear this stuff. Leave some comments where you're from. If you guys have any questions, we are speaking with Chris, and I'm gonna do a, you know, if you do have any questions, please leave a question in a comment. We'll ask Chris. We have some comments here right now where we have Melissa says we have the luxury to think that from where we are now, but I do remember not feeling. I had choices when I was 12, 13, 14, 16, 17, 18, living a very asset limited life and surrounded by some people that weren't on the right path. Yeah, I mean, I think that in our adolescence, I think when we're when we're 16, 17, 18 years old, I mean, we have to recognize that we're kids at that time, you know, and we're learning about ourselves and our environments and the people around us, and we're going through all those emotions. Then add a dash of puberty in there, and sometimes it could be kind of crazy, you know.
yeah,
Um, but you know, honestly, I just feel that like I'm really, really grateful that we had an opportunity to speak. And I, you know, if there's any questions, now's the time to leave some comments, guys. But Chris, my question to you is, I feel that you're a special person who is striving for more. You're striving for more in your career. You're striving for more in your personal life, and that's beautiful to see because I mean I'm on the same path, man. I'm on the journey, you know. So you know, is there anything specifically that you wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to say on this Facebook Live?
but one, I would like to just kind of, you know, touch back on shame or
Yep.
shameless a little bit, um, because that's something that is coming up rather quickly, and it's very, Michael. I have to tell you, um, when I found out about your show and I started watching through, I'm going, holy smokes, this guy's doing what I'm working on here that I haven't launched yet. You know, so Shame or Shameless podcast is it's gonna be a very similar podcast. I'm starting. Uh, it's gonna be an audio show only in the beginning, but eventually we'll be moving to video. But we're going to be featuring different
Love it.
guests each week to to share their stories, right? Because have we all have gifts to share with the world, and a lot of times uh, people don't have that platform to
Absolutely.
tell their story.
Again, guys, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast. It's super, super helpful for you guys to subscribe, give us a review, and you can follow us on all of our services at I Choose Series, on Instagram, on Facebook, now the podcast, and yes, the podcast is now also available on the I Choose Series YouTube as well. So thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in, and thank you so much for the love and the support. Visit www.ichoose.one because it's one choice that can change our life forever. I know I keep saying it, but I believe it, and I'm not just saying it, I'm living it. Thanks so much. Talk soon.